So since we just started recording, we're just talking about our mugs. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Okay, so all right. So this one I got from when I left my job as a trainer. One of the clients, they gave me this, and it says a truly great personal trainer is hard to find, difficult to part with, impossible to forget. So every time I'm about to do a workout or anytime I'm working on my bits and whatnot, I drink something from this. It encourages me. Oh, and this is Patricia's, right? So you see, this is Patricia's. So the cadence class, they always get to buy, like, save up stuff, and they buy stuff in their little shop, but they're only had the best dad ever mug. So this is Patricia's mug. Got for a kid.
She got the best dad.
I like her mug. I like her mug. Mine could be swearing right now. This is from Taiwan.
It probably is.
It was by a friend. I don't know what any of this says. So I hope I am not being offensive right now.
That's funny. Mine's from Mexico, and I think I bought it at the when you're about to cross back into America, you're at the border and all the people are selling you stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody sold me a bunch of mugs and a pair of boots that I still wear.
Okay.
They're my work boots. Where's your mug, Michelle?
Oh, I got one.
It's cloudy outside. You got to have a mug.
There's nothing in it. I didn't even get lunch today. I was just eating a couple pieces of chocolate that tied me over.
Oh, shoot.
What's that say? Thank you. You're awesome for being awesome.
Yeah. So it says, thank you for being awesome. My former neighbor, who I really need to go see because she moved into an assisted living residence and I have been just slammed. But I used to help her out when she needed it, like if she wasn't feeling well with getting her mail or taking her trash cans up or those kinds of things. And so she got me that last Christmas, and I really miss her, but you wouldn't be able to tell that because I haven't been to see her, which is terrible. I just feel like it's been very full this fall.
It's a whirlwind.
It is a whirlwind, but it is a high priority of mine to get in to see her before the end of this year.
Yep.
Because I miss her.
Well, Michelle, speaking of somebody that you used to do nice things for, Sunday was great. You guys preached really good, but I didn't feel too good about doing nice things for other people. God convicted me of which Samaritan I was. I mean, which character of the Good
Which character you were? Yeah, well, I'm feeling like the priest and the Levite myself today. I don't know.
Oh, Philip, you used to be such a good person. What happened?
Welcome to Second Take at Eastlake, a podcast of Eastlake Community Church in Irmo, South Carolina. You are invited to join us any Sunday at 9 or 11.
Well, I'm always a Samaritan. That's my humble opinion. I think I'm always a Samaritan.
Okay. You've never been too busy to help somebody in need, huh?
I don't think I'm not okay.
Perfect.
My humility is known throughout the universe. Okay, so
well, it wasn't talking about humility.
No, I definitely felt
Jack the Destroyer, man.
Zach. Oh no! You know what? As many times as if we told those stories about Samaritan and and Moses, and it's like, have we ever looked at ourselves as the Pharaoh? Have we ever looked at ourselves as people who walked away?
Pharaoh, hopefully not the Pharaoh.
Well,
stories.
Well, I just mean like anybody's story.
In the Exodus, he felt like Pharaoh. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was paying attention to this.
Yeah, but hey, so that was a good segue into what we're doing. So we're on our next to the last part of this series, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this one. So there's two more. Third from the last. And this one was, I will consider you as a part of, and this is a series called Gracism that we're in. And it's about considering others. And I would say the key scripture was the Good Samaritan. There was other scripture, but that was the key. And
Look, 10.
and the most funnest, because funnest is a word, the most funnest part of it was that Rob and Michelle co-taught. They were co-teachers, and I just think my AD&D just AD&D, my ADD,
ADHD,
my
ADD.
AD&D. That's like, I don't
That
know.
too.
Anyways, it
His
was excited
attention
because
his attention Dungeons and Dragons.
I was
yeah,
thinking Dungeons and Dragons when he
Uh-huh.
said that.
Harlem.
Yeah.
How that would play out, I
well,
think.
my AD&D was very happy that the pace changes and you guys did that, and I really did enjoy it. I'm sure Malcolm's AD&D was excited too, because I know Malcolm's got it just like I do.
A few of them letters up in there. Yep.
Mhm, mhm.
So you guys kind of taught, and one of the funnest parts was the story that you guys shared at the opening. I guess it was towards the opening, if I remember correctly, about how you guys really came to a point where you had to consider each other. Because both of you came, were at Eastlake in a very, very difficult time. And I thought that would be a cool way to start, and just talking about it in the best way that you guys feel cool talking about it. But I mean, not too many people share stories like that, but yet I would say the majority of people in our church have difficult relationships in their life that they're trying to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to me it was fun because most people didn't know that Michelle and I hated each other and have contracts taken out on the other person by hitmen, and then I'm just kidding. No, we ran into the regular normal tension that happens in a new relationship when there's stress on all sides, and for the first like 18 months I would categorize what Michelle and I were trying to navigate separately until we finally woke up, and I think God did a cool thing, was how we were navigating specific trauma that we each were going through or had been through. And so it made it hard for us to connect at a level that we obviously are capable of, because we've been able to do that. But because of that, we were just missing each other a lot. Whether just personality type or just very different personality types. I was going through a wrestling match that I had just overcome this idea of women in ministry. And God had done an amazingly cool thing, a couple of years before I got to Eastlake, about showing me what the scripture really said. But this was my first chance to be on staff with a fellow pastor who was a woman. And I didn't realize that there were still things being worked out in my head on that. So, just with my passionate personality, and Michelle being a lot more like my wife, by the way, which is kind of ironic. Like Michelle's not my wife, if you don't know us, but she's like my wife, Jenny, personality type wise, in terms of they are both very good list people. They're the kind of people that guys like me need. But that also means there's sometimes conflict in those. And we were working that out. I think that would about my side of that.
Yeah.
But you probably would add, Michelle, because you had some good things to say as we talked about it.
Well, and I think that I was navigating a lot of the staff changes and changes in my life because of staff changes, and all that was difficult, and it was a difficult staff change. And so, you came in at a time that was just very difficult for us as an organization. We were navigating a lot of change. And some of it we didn't navigate as well as maybe we could have. And you are a very passionate person. And so, you might be being loud because you're passionate, and I can get loud too, by the way. I know I can. But I could perceive that, and in a different way. I just felt like you weren't hearing me. And maybe you weren't sometimes. And so I don't know, but I had to bring that to your attention. So it doesn't help fix anything if we don't talk about the things. And so I think that my coming to you, you said this when we were on stage, is that, you like to respond to people if they point things out that something's bothering them, then you do want to address that and do things differently if it's in your power to do it. And so, from my side of the street, I had to identify that and bring it to you. Because I think sometimes we expect people to mind read, or we think that they, they should understand that they're stepping on our toes without us even telling them. And sometimes it's just not intentional. So you've got to be able to share, hey, this is bothering me and why. And if a person cares about the relationship, then they're going to make adjustments.
Yeah.
What I realized after too, I thought about this after Sunday, sadly, or I would have probably brought this up. I had come from an environment where the passion was actually needed. What I mean by that is we were things at my other church before I transferred over to Eastlake, where I had been put in a position where I had to really be fighting for people who were being victimized. And so I was still really coming down from that a little bit. Not that my personality isn't already that way, but that defensive kind of like, I've got to be heard, because I had been surrounded by people who were not hearing warning signs I was giving, where there was actual spiritual abuse taking place of staff members and congregants. And I won't go into too much detail on that, but you guys have heard those stories inside the room. And it didn't occur to me until after we finished this, of course, or even as I was driving home today, like I was set up by myself coming out of where I came from to have that be difficult, no matter how smooth things were at Eastlake.
Yeah.
Because I had spent 18 months fighting to actually get someone removed who needed to be removed and was removed to bring health to a congregation. And so for me, I think when you said something to me, Michelle, it was like, I remember another interaction where I apologized to you when Chris Buck was doing our reviews. It was one of those moments for me, is where I was sitting in that room. I won't get into all the details of it, but I was like, hey, Michelle, I'm realizing something right now, because when we were in between pastors, Chris was the chairman of the elder board, and he came in and did the executive team staff review.
Right.
And I remember looking at Michelle, and it was like an aha moment. I'm like, hey, I think I've been doing this to you. And you were like, you have. And I'm like, crap.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually important in other kinds of relationships, because if you come from a family where everybody's very loud, and you have to kind of fight to, if it's important to you, you need to fight about it. Otherwise it must not be important and it will be ignored. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you approach things at a lot higher horsepower, just average things. Then if you come from a family where, well, we talk it out, and when I say no, I mean no, and I expect you to accept no. And and those are, and none of them's wrong. I mean, I think about like my big fat Greek wedding, you think of the different cultural backgrounds and the different things that people bring. Now there's a group of really loud people, and that's how they are, and they think that if you're not doing that, well, you don't care about it. And so those different things in relationship, that's what we see in premarital counseling. That's what we see in marriage counseling, is these people with their different ways of relating.
Yeah. And at the core of that story really is this, is the idea of considering each other, which is why you shared it. But the empathy, I'll say this, the maturity that it takes to have empathy. I kind of see considering and being empathetic kind of as the same thing. Do you guys see that? And so it's like the ability to like see things, or attempt to see things from the other person's perspective, opens up your eyes to a lot of things. I mean, you're right, Michelle. Like in my house, we really don't ever get heated. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to some people, but we don't. We really don't. I mean, there's just not ever. Nobody ever raises their voice, and I know that sounds like I'm lying. People tell me there's no way. It's just the way we are, and I don't know why, but like it doesn't mean we don't get points across. It just means we do it in that kind of way, and so that's just how we do it. But I think, how does this play out, as in the topic of race? how to be empathetic in the topic of Gracism in different cultures, races, ethnicities, and things like that. I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to say this, and I'd love
considering-
Malcolm.
Yeah.
I'd love to say this, but I'd love to hear from Malcolm after I say this. I'm just saying this because I think this ties a bow on what you're saying. And if it doesn't, throw the bow out.
Mhm.
It how it plays is what we've been talking about is Michelle and I paused long enough to hear each other's story.
Mhm.
We paused long enough to hear what the other person needed and why. And I think that's how that plays out in race, the LGBTQ conversation, marriage conversations, and all that is, do we pause long enough to hear what the other person is saying? But Malcolm, as an African American, I would actually, and I'm not trying to take this interview over from you, but I've been dying to ask him this. How does that play for you in this conversation with all these white guys and gals that are trying to engage you in this?
Are y'all like just like any conversation I would have with someone
No,
who's
just the
Yeah. Do you feel like people understand you of other races? Do you feel like when people meet you, they get you, they have empathy, like they see things from your perspective, they consider you, or do you not feel that?
mm, that's a-
Like it would be like me, I guess, going to another country. I would think as an American in, Switzerland, I just don't know that people would understand the why behind everything and what makes me tick. Do you feel that way? Or do you feel considered? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer.
yeah. And I think that for me, hey, it's like you can tell when certain people are intimidated by just how I look. And so you'll have people that right off the bat they won't be as intimidated because they'll either know that there's like a few things that I either have to say or they already know about me that they're not nervous about. But if they don't know these things they're nervous around me, is that I'm educated, I'm married, and I'm in ministry. Okay. If they know those three things about me, at least one of those are like, okay. But for the average person, just like around me, I notice a tenseness there.
Mhm.
So I either, engage in conversation and then I drop one of those three, and then I kind of notice they get a little bit more, and I don't even think they realize it. Or I just go about my day, but that's kind of realized. Now with people that know me that are, I have, it's times difficult conversations with, if I know they care about me, it's good. It is easier, much easier for me now to understand where they come from if I've had relationship and they've built up the equity to say certain things to me because I know that they really care. Like last year when we were having our third baby, and I saw what type of sacrifices y'all made to make sure that me and Patricia were well because she had to be on bed rest. So the conversations we have, I'm like, we're good and everything. So yeah, that's what I see from people just that don't know me. Like those are the three: pastor, ministry, educated, and married. But if I don't get that, I notice there's an intimidation factor, and I wish it shouldn't be that way. But that's what I see sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Malcolm? I'm not trying. This is just God just told me to do this. Now, I would like to hear from you. Do you feel like there's ever people that just discount your story as a Black man because they just can't get their hands around it? I think that's more what I was thinking of.
Oh
Because
yeah.
there are people that are kind of like, well, it's not that way. You're just telling an event that occurred in your life.
Mm.
And they're not even considering that because they can't get their hands around. There's no way that still happens in America in 2023.
Yeah. I think those because I think what I've seen is people who I guess they come from a background or their home life, they talk about politics more, so they seem like they know more than someone whose family didn't talk as much about those certain things. So as I've grown up, I got discredited a lot because it's like we're more sophisticated with pockets than you. And so you don't really understand what's going on because you don't understand this, or your family isn't well versed in this. And so that's what I really saw in growing up in Chicago when Obama, the first Black president, was elected and then reelected. You definitely saw a lot, and no one ever asked me. No one ever talks. The first person that ever asked me, what is it like to be Black, or like, how are you doing with the whole George Floyd things? I think it was only one person, and that's the first time someone's ever asked me about it. And I was so taken back. I was like, wow, you actually care enough to ask me about it. So yeah, that's kind of how that's kind of how I see. Like, they definitely just discredit. Yeah. But I've come to see, through Eastlake and just people now, that people actually care to know, and it means the world. I mean, it really means the world to know that you care enough to listen to me. Yeah.
Wow.
So when you, Malcolm, were talking at first, you said that when you tell people that you're married, you're in ministry, there were three things you said.
Educated.
Yeah.
Educated. Okay. And you said that if you lead with those things, then it puts people at ease. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you attribute the dis-ease to? Is that about your culture, or what do you think that's about?
Well, what I've seen, what I've noticed in public, just I would say the way I dress. And I mean, I like wearing boots. Sometimes I always outside, I wear my White Sox Letterman. I wear dark clothes and everything. And I don't dress like the prototypical, I guess, when I'm out and about, educated, or this person might be, I don't know, and it's how people see that you should dress when you're like one of those three. But I don't fit that mold exactly. And so I think that's a disease. They're not used to seeing that. And so there's times where I'm walking in, like, this happens actually a lot. Like, I'm walking behind a lady, it could be different to see what, I'm walking behind her, walking into a store, and I just notice that she's she's really nervous or whatnot. But if I'm holding my child, like one Corbin or somebody with me, it's a lot less unease or something like that. Or when I'm dressed up, after church, because I like to wear ties and everything, I notice the same stories. It's a different story. So I see it in how I physically look at times.
Okay.
That's
interesting.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I didn't really have anything. I was just saying that's interesting. I see it play out at Eastlake in a positive way in our teaching team, in that there are so many different styles of teaching that go on. I feel like our worship, we do have different people leading worship, but all in all, it's kind of like, one thing that you're going to get to experience every Sunday. Whereas the teaching team, it's drastically different every week. And I see it playing out in that we have to consider each other and why we do what we do the way we do it. As far as teaching goes, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, for me, when Ray teaches, I have to remind myself that Ray grew up a completely different way than me. So what a sermon looks like for Ray is that passionate thing that we all love. So I'm not saying it's a negative, but I'm saying it is a noticeable, like, teaching style of, I would say I didn't grow up in the Black church, but I'm assuming kind of like a Black church style of preaching. And then to be able to consider, why does that happen? Why is it, it's a good thing that Ray doesn't teach the way I would teach. That's a different voice, and to consider, and then also to consider all the people in the room that are saying, yes, somebody finally preaching it like it's supposed to, preaching the word like it's supposed to be preached. You know what I mean? And then to have the people of one culture saying, oh, good, I'm so glad that that style is being preached, even though that's not the way I grew up. Like, it's all considering each other. It's not like, I don't like it, I'm out. It's like, oh, let me have empathy and see why this is important. And let me see how I can grow from it. Same thing with Michelle, Michelle, I'm not going to talk about every one of our teaching style, but it's different. Somebody might be like, I wish Michelle would just, get crazy like Ray gets crazy. But there's also, they don't.
Yeah.
But there's also people in the room that are like, oh, I'm so glad Michelle's just calmly presenting the word, very intentionally in the style that Michelle has. And so it's just like considering each other. Like every Sunday, we put this to practice.
Yeah.
As we open the word and we receive it through different voices and different ways. I mean, I think it's beautiful.
I do too. Do you remember Ray saying, have you all heard him say that he is happy if everybody is unhappy 20% of the time?
Yeah.
Because in a multicultural church, you're going to have things you don't like. Every one of us. There are things that we would do differently if it was all done just for us. But we have to live in that tension, because we know that just because it's my 20% day to be uncomfortable, then it might be Philip's or Malcolm's 20% day the next week,
It's true.
And that's what I like. The diversity goes, to the music choices, to all the things. So, and I remember early on in the process, even when Steve was here and we were having the conversations, the early conversations, me, you, and Ray and Steve at the Bucks house, Michelle, I'll always remember there was a hurricane and we were having a meeting. And we were talking out some things moving forward. And we were talking about Tracy on more full-time and some of those things in those early moments. And it was this idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable is the best way to consider somebody. And we didn't use that language, but now I'm attached to I will consider you, because if I'm uncomfortable and you're comfortable, and I'm not talking about a nefarious thing where there's somebody taking dominance over someone. I'm talking about in a mutual relationship. You're able to work through and grow, and you're able to get pushed out of you talk about this, Philip, a lot, echo chamber. You get pushed out of that echo chamber into a place of learning and vulnerability, to be like, I'm uncomfortable right now. What's making me uncomfortable? And then all of a sudden you realize that there's times where the person across from you is probably uncomfortable because you're comfortable. And then you become allies in the journey of trying to figure out how to carry each other through the uncomfortable moments. And that's what a multicultural church does.
It's cool. So Malcolm, this is not the same as what you're talking about, so I don't want it to sound like it is. But I will say that I do experience people treating me a certain way based on how I look. Completely different than for my skin color. But I do feel like when I lived in California, people will always say, like, do you miss it? And I'll say, I don't. The only thing that I miss about California is I was normal there. Like I was just another person there,
Another hippie.
Just another hippie. Like it wasn't, and don't get me wrong, there's a part of me that loves to stand out. Like, so I'm not gonna do, there's a part of me that loves to just be unique. So 100%. But in the South, I mean, people make a lot of assumptions of me. I feel like just based on that I don't look the way they look, but what's funny is I look at Southerners and I'm trying to figure them out too.
Right.
Like I remember moving here, seeing all the air conditioned shirts, which now makes sense because it's so hot. But the shirts with the vents on it, I'd never seen a shirt with the vent on it. But like it makes perfect sense in the South, but I remember thinking like,
what are they doing?
And everybody has them, and I'm the only one that doesn't.
Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna get me one.
That's
But
too funny.
That's a funny way to point out just like a cultural difference of just like you're just trying to figure each other out. And then when people get to know me, they can tell like, okay, this guy's, he's normal. He's not crazy. Well, he's a little crazy, but not like that crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not the same as the race conversation, but it is a little bit of a like culturally just like people trying to figure you out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, I'm glad you said that, Phil, because yes, racism started as a conversation between Dr. Anderson and his white roommate. Let's be real. That's where that went back to. Letters Across the Divide led to Gracism, led to all these things. But let's not forget, it doesn't only apply to race. That's a great starting line, but it applies to differences in personality and differences in Michelle brought it up, where you were brought up, and just kind of, your family of origin, all of those things. But at its core is the gospel of reconciliation. And so Gracism is the gospel lived out by reconciling across all of those things, which requires you to consider somebody and a different background and a different upbringing.
It does.
I thought you were going to say you get categorized as the guy that's always got weed. So I was waiting for you to go there.
Yeah.
I know that happens. It cracks me up, because once you know that that's not you.
Yeah.
But people make an assumption based on who knows what. Like, you don't know that guy got weed from. Yeah. So when I was smoking.
It was when I went to one of the kids, the kids in the youth, Owen, he invited me to mentor day at Spring Hill. And it was like, 20 other people inviting their mentors in there. And we were the only black, white pair there. And
oh, wow.
And yeah, it was, and when he got up and he spoke and everything, I came up there and whatnot, because they write like a little essay and everything. And afterward, his teacher said, like Owen, like that's not common. We don't see that a lot here. That's awesome. Like that was one of the more special ones I had. And that, and that, so what encourages me is when, even if they're not listening, even if they're just going to stay ignorant, having them the exposure to see that, no, this person, this woman, this black, this white, like that's just a stereotype, because you met this person and they're not like that at all. And so that is real cool. Like I've trained a lot of people around the area. And so like when I'm in the shopping market and I see one of my friends, like a white lady, she's with her friend, she's nerd. And then I'm like, what's going on, Brittany? She's like, Mom, baby, get a hug. And then her friend just is like, oh, like those are the moments I look for where it's just like, you teach them something. And I would say, with considering I've grown the most, I think with being, the student pastor down here, with learning to consider and communicate how the kids in our youth group were raised in their culture versus what I was raised with. It's in terms of ministry, people speaking to me, because in Chicago, we talk with our hands. Like in Black community, we talk with our hands. We speak up, and we feeling it. And you get called out, and you like, yeah, like you vibing with it, like let's go. And so the base is there, everything's there, and then you're vibing with it. Even ever since I was a teenager, that's always, and it's not even the sports. That's just like I've always been locked in that code. So when I got down here, I realized, and Rob was like, Malcolm, kids down here respond. You gotta talk a little slower. Don't keep the passion there, but you gotta talk a little bit slower. You gotta this is that, and the progression has been there and everything, to where I'm considering that these kids love me, but I gotta consider how their culture and how they receive things. And there's been a lot of growth there. Rob, you remember that? Those talks you have?
I do. I remember watching you hop around in front, and I'm like going, Malcolm, I totally get what you're doing. And you were in trainer mode, and you were jumping, and these kids were in the room, and they were with you for like 50, and then they got exhausted. And they're like, I don't even know how to talk with this man.
They're like, I need a water break.
My son came home and he goes, Malcolm's really passionate. He goes, but Dad, he loses me about 6 minutes in. And I'm like, how? And he's like, because I don't know what he's saying anymore, because he's jumping around, and you absorbed that, and came back to me like a month later, and you're like, you know what, I'm beginning to realize what you're saying to me. I've got to not lose who I am, but I've got to make sure that I'm tailoring to these people that are sitting in front of me.
Yeah.
And out of the core is what it takes to consider somebody. Is you've just got to, you don't lose who you are.
Yeah.
You just figure out how that meshes with the people there.
Right.
Yeah. I had a really cool moment with Charlie and Thomas, because we always debrief after Wednesday nights, and we had a great conversation. And then I played them a song, and I said, hey, it's a very urban like Christian rap song, and I said, hey, y'all, as you're listening to this, tell me where Malcolm hears the gospel. And I played it for them, and afterward I asked them again, and it took them a minute. And I said, guys, I just want you to know how much it takes for me to go from there to hear what the kids, so they hear me. And I told them, when y'all become ministers, are you willing to do that and consider your audience and make that adjustment? And so yeah, it's made me a lot better just as a person, seeing that and capturing that. We always play, like when they first walk into the room, our 8th through 12th grade, I play like a little 2-minute, Christian, music video, but I always have to think, and I have to tell some of my leaders, like, hey, that's a cool suggestion, but that's a little too urban Christian for them. And I want the words to be clear as to what is being said. So we can't play that, but let's play something where it's clear, everything. So I never would have did that. I would have, so yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's funny. Yeah, but you gotta, I could see how, and what you were saying with that song is like, it was hard for them to hear the gospel in the song, but you hear it right away.
I
almost like two different languages.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Well, dude, I'm so thankful that you have that spirit, though, we were joking about humility earlier, but the humility to say, all right, I'm going to do what I need to do for the sake of communicating to these kids.
Right.
And not lose yourself, but to be able to say, I will become this for these, to communicate the gospel to these people. That's huge, dude. So
yeah, that's big, buddy.
Way to go, Malcolm. By the way, yeah, Malcolm did so good, we just couldn't put him back on the bench. Ray's not here today.
I'm just saying, like, I subbed, y'all subbed me in for Ray. I was on the bench, getting my hair braided, and I'm rapping, writing my short story, and y'all want me. So I'm like, all right, it's time to do this.
Time to deliver.
I think the last time you subbed for me, though, I think Ray was here. I can't even.
Oh, that's right.
When that was.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to watch it. I was so busy. I can't even imagine what was going on between you and Ray.
That was fun, huh?
That's funny. Let's do one more question before we close, okay?
Okay.
So this is kind of about how Rob was kind of talking about different views on women and pastors, and how his beliefs had changed, his theological stance had changed, which I love, because I really respect people who don't think they know everything that God is teaching them. Like, I love people that will admit that they're on a journey. And that does not mean that the Bible is not, is changing. It means that we're growing in our process of Christ likeness. It doesn't mean that the Bible changed. But when people think they have it all figured out, they really do. I have caution for that, because I've been a Christian for a long time, and I
don't have it all figured out, Philip.
No, God doesn't fit in the box. I think that when I get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of shock for me, and I'm okay with that. And so all that to say, this was our thing that we talked about in our meeting previously, rethinking our presuppositions on biblical topics and considering others. And how do you do that? How would you say, how do we come to the conclusion that that's okay? Just so many things we can talk about this, but what are your thoughts on that? I guess
I'll say one thing. I'll say one thing and then let everyone else talk, because this is important. First thing, it starts with making sure that everybody around you doesn't all think the same way you do. You've got to have people around you that you might even vehemently disagree with on uncore issues. And that's how it happened for me. I started looking at the women around me that I knew their hearts. I watched what God was doing through them, and I'm like, how are they a pastor? I was taught that doesn't happen. They can't be pastors. And then I began to have dialogues with them to ask them about their call. And I started saying, tell me about your call to pastoring. Because I know you're not a pagan who just jumped in and did this. And I know that if you felt like you were going against God's will, you wouldn't be doing this, because I know your character. And it was the willingness to have female pastors right here. That I had female pastors around me while I didn't think females should be pastors, because I did love Jesus. And so we could figure the rest of it out and insert that anything. Do you have people that believe blank in your life that's diametrically opposed to what you believe, so that you can be challenged to see it from their perspective? That doesn't mean you're going to change your mind, but it does mean you're going to begin to see another angle that might change or refract some of what you're learning. And so it starts with making sure that everyone around you isn't exactly like you. Not using them either. So I'm talking about genuine friendships. Like, you build genuine friendships. Republican built a genuine friendship with a Democrat. That's a practical one. I'm not trying to go political, but that's when I think people get their hands around. And the conversation begins to change both of you.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's really important to understand that none of us, and be willing to admit that none of us have it all right. And so, you know, so if you have people that are around you that have different opinions, then start to understand how they got to those opinions, and be willing to say, you know, there are other ways to look at this. It's so arrogant to think that our way is better than everyone else's way. And, you know, we reinforce that if we only stay around people who are exactly like us. And then we're not confronted with our own arrogance. But if we are willing to listen to alternate opinions, we have to be humble enough to do that. And then, you know, you just might find, wow, somebody thinks differently in that. I had no idea that was even an option. Yep.
I like that.
I mean, for me, it's been a huge help, far as just having people that think different from me and everything. You know, it's like, I always use this analogy and everything, like my wife, like I'm the spice, she's a spice rack, she hold me down. And I got a lot of spice racks in my life. They hold me down, and I really appreciate that. And someone said, I think I was complaining to one of my friends. I was like, I don't think you understand, man. Like, I don't think she's understanding that I gotta move a lot. And she's just like, okay, Malcolm, if you're a boat, then okay, this friend, she's an anchor. What else do you want an anchor to do other than hold you down and be grounded? Like, you need. And I was like, here you go again, giving me some. And so I really appreciate people around me being different, because it definitely helps me out, and it definitely keeps everything balanced. It really does. And I think you got to bite your tongue more, and you got to realize that, you know, because your first instinction is like, no, like this way, but it's been really good. It's been really good to have people around me like that.
That's cool. I feel like when I get to heaven, I feel like God will, you know, my conversations with God will be more of like, I really wanted to get this right, God. I really tried, and I do believe God knows my heart. I tried to live life the way that Jesus lived, and I had a lot of voices telling me how that was, and a lot of lenses and filters in which I should interpret that. But God, I feel like I was in tune with you. I feel like I was in tune with your Holy Spirit, and, you know, and that there's grace for the places that I might get it wrong. And I'm comfortable with that conversation versus this is the way it's going to be. This is the way it was, and I've got it figured out. The lack of humility in that, I don't vibe with that. I just don't have peace with that. And, you know, right now, there's a lot of stuff going on with deconstruction and Christianity. And a lot of people are afraid of it. And we don't have to get deep into this because it could be a whole podcast. But to me, there's a positive to it. There's a reconstruction that makes you say, this is what I believe and this is why. And that's a good thing. That means I'm not just listening to somebody. That means I'm really thinking about what does the Bible say and coming to great conclusions. And sometimes your reconstruction might mean, I do think that women should be pastors, you know? I don't think that's a negative thing to reconstruct, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and I like what Preston Sprinkle says, and you guys are going to hear Preston stuff more and more from me, because those that don't know, he'll be coming for a limited thing at Eastlake in February. But he talks about this idea: deconstruction isn't the dirty word. Deconversion is the thing I'm afraid of for people.
Yeah.
So, but understanding an in-depth theology of Jesus, of God, requires that we deconstruct some of the presuppositions that we have. And so it's like, no, I don't want people to deconvert. I don't want people to get to the point where they give up all hope in what I know to be true in the Bible. But I actually want my kids that live in this house. I won't say this about your kids. My kids that live I want them to deconstruct while it's safe, where they can ask questions, so that they can reconstruct. You just said they can reconstruct on a solid foundation. So the idea of deconstructing doesn't scare me. Deconversion makes me nervous. Deconstruction does not.
It doesn't scare me.
And I think if we're going to consider, we have to be willing to deconstruct our presupposed ideas.
We do. And I think, Philip, you talked about fear. Rob, you just talked about fear. I mean, I think that is a big part of this, is that sometimes in religious circles, we have made God out to be this person to fear. And we misunderstand grace. Grace doesn't mean you can do everything that you want to do and there be no consequences. But we don't have to be so afraid we're going to mess up. We're not going to lose our salvation because we question something or make a mistake. God has grace for us. And I think as I understood God's grace and God's acceptance of me, I was much more willing to reconsider my presuppositions, because when I thought that if I didn't look at it the right way, people were going to go to hell and it's going to be my fault, then I feel really responsible. And all of a sudden I'm uptight about everything.
Yeah.
But when I can trust in God's love, then I'm like, God's got this person and God's got me. And I don't have to be personally responsible for these people getting into the kingdom of God. He's big enough to reveal himself. And so learning to let God be God and not just be wrapped up in fear about serving him is a big part of what has made me able to do this.
Yep. Those are
really good.
Really good input. Well, we're going to have to go because we ran out of time, but this was great conversation. This series just really gets us talking about some great things. I love it. And so, continue the conversation and look at the people around you and consider them. Try to have empathy. See things through. If somebody's really under your skin, try real hard to see things through their lens, the way they see things. And because God wants us to be in community and in relationship with each other. So don't give up on that. And that's a good thing to do. All right. So I'll say,
try Jesus.
See you guys later.
Eastlake Community Church is an intentional, multicultural community empowered by the Holy Spirit. We passionately pursue a loving relationship with God and everyone Jesus was sent to die for, here, near, and far.